Welcome to the deep dive, where we really get into the nitty-gritty of the stuff you send us. And this time you sent us something pretty cool. It's called Mental Resilience Through Physical Challenge Answer Key. It's almost like, a guide for your brain when your body is really being put to the test.
Yeah, exactly. It's like having a manual for your mind when things get tough.
So basically what we want to do today is really figure out what's happening up there when you're pushing your physical limits and, most importantly, give you some real strategies, right? Like actual things you could do to build up that mental toughness. Because let's be honest, everyone hits that wall sometimes, that point where you just want to quit. And this deep dive is about giving you the tools to push through it.
Absolutely. And what's really great about the material you provided is that it doesn't just tell you to be tough.
Yeah.
It actually gives you the why and the how. It bridges the gap between what's going on in your body and how your mind is reacting to it. It's all about getting a handle on that inner landscape, that internal dialogue.
Okay, so let's dive right into it, right?
Yeah.
The first part of this material really focuses on what happens in your head, when things start to get physically demanding. And it talks about these three common negative thought patterns: catastrophizing, self-doubt, and escape fantasizing. Why do those tend to surface when we're really pushing ourselves? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, so when it comes to catastrophizing, right, it's like your brain is hitting that panic button a little too easily. It's blowing things way out of proportion. You start having thoughts like, this pain is just unbearable, or I'm never going to finish this. This is it. I'm done.
I can't take it anymore. Yeah.
Exactly. And this framework suggests it's actually coming from your brain's threat detection system. It's that ancient part of our brains that's always on the lookout for danger. And when we're under physical stress, that system can get a little, overzealous. It basically makes even normal discomfort feel like a life or death situation. So, you're just trying to finish a workout, but your brain's acting like you're running from a saber-toothed tiger.
Right. It's like your internal smoke detector's going off, even if there's just a little bit of smoke.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's why it's so important to recognize this, to understand that this is just your brain's default setting, not necessarily reality.
Okay. And then there's self-doubt, which is a whole other beast, right? Those thoughts like, I'm just not strong enough for this, or, you know what, I shouldn't have even tried this. Where does that come from?
Well, the interesting thing is when you're really exerting yourself, your brain actually has less cognitive power available. It's like your mental bandwidth gets squeezed.
Really?
Yeah. So all those insecurities and limiting beliefs you might have, they kind of have more room to creep in because your brain's too busy trying to keep your body going.
So you're saying it's not that you're suddenly weaker, it's just that your brain's a little distracted, right?
Exactly. It's like trying to solve a complex math problem when you're running a marathon. Your brain's just not at its best.
Makes sense. And then, of course, there's escape fantasizing, which, I think we've all been there. It's that voice that's like, just stop. No one's going to blame you. You can always try again tomorrow, right?
Oh, yeah. That's a classic. And the thing is, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually your brain trying to protect you. It's looking for the fastest way to get back to that comfortable, safe state.
Homeostasis, right?
Yeah. It wants to maintain that equilibrium.
So it sees quitting as a way to restore balance. Okay, that makes sense. Now, the material makes a really important distinction, right? There's productive pain, which is the kind that helps you grow, and then there's harmful pain, which is obviously something we want to avoid. How can we tell the difference between the two?
This is where listening to your body becomes absolutely crucial, right? Like really tuning into those sensations. So productive pain, it's usually pretty symmetrical. It's like that feeling of your muscles burning after a good workout. It's that aching, that fatigue. But it tends to go away when you rest or you change what you're doing.
Right. It has that good sore feeling.
Right.
Not that sharp stabbing pain.
Exactly. And mentally, even though it's uncomfortable, you still feel like you're in control. You might even feel focused and determined.
Okay. So it's uncomfortable, but you can kind of push through it, right?
Right. And often, if you adjust your breathing or your technique, it can actually improve.
Okay. So that's the pain we want to embrace in a way.
Yeah, in a way. Now, harmful pain, that's a different story. That's often asymmetrical. It's more intense on one side of your body.
Okay, so like a sharp pain in your knee, for example, that might be a sign of something more serious.
Exactly. And it can feel sharp, stabbing, pinching. Sometimes it comes on really suddenly.
Oh, yeah. And that one, it doesn't go away when you rest.
No, it usually sticks around, or it might even get worse.
Yeah.
And there's usually this gut feeling, it's like an alarm bell going off in your head.
It's like your body's screaming at you, stop! Right!
Exactly. And it doesn't get better with those mental tricks we'll talk about later.
So The bottom line is we really need to pay attention to what our body's telling us, right?
Absolutely. It's all about awareness.
Okay, so now let's talk about this idea of inner dialogue. It's that constant chatter in our heads, all those thoughts and judgments and stories we tell ourselves. How does that actually affect how we experience physical discomfort?
Well, this material lays out a few really powerful ways. First, it's all about how we're framing the experience, right? Are we seeing this discomfort as a sign of growth? Like we're getting stronger, we're pushing our limits. Or are we interpreting it as punishment?
Like, why am I doing this to myself?
Exactly. Our inner dialogue kind of sets that stage, and it also sets our expectations, right? Are we telling ourselves that this is temporary, that it's going to pass, or do we feel like it's going to last forever?
Right, like it's never going to end.
And then there's where we're focusing our attention, you
Yeah.
know? If we're constantly fixated on how much it hurts, we're actually amplifying those sensations.
It's like when you have a little scratch and you
Yeah.
keep touching it and it just feels worse,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. But if we can shift our attention, maybe focus on something else like our breathing or the environment around us, we can actually diminish the pain.
So it's almost like a mind trick, but it really works, right?
Yeah, it really can. And then our inner dialogue also shapes our emotional response, you know? Are we getting angry and frustrated with the discomfort, or are we accepting it as part of the process? And this ties into a sense of purpose too, right? Are we connecting this experience to a larger goal, to something that matters to us? Or do we feel like we're just suffering for no reason? And lastly, our thoughts can actually trigger stress responses in the body, which can make the physical sensations even worse. It's this crazy feedback loop.
So you're saying that the same physical sensation, like let's say a burning in your legs,
Yeah.
it can actually feel different depending on what you're thinking.
Absolutely. It's incredible, right? The power of our minds.
That's pretty mind-blowing. Now let's talk about the physiological connection between physical stress and mental resilience, right? The source describes it as a two-way street. So how does pushing our bodies actually make us mentally tougher? What's happening on a biological level?
So when you stress your body the right way, right, it actually triggers something called a hormetic response. Basically, a little bit of stress makes your cells stronger in the long run.
It's like giving your cells a little workout too.
Exactly. And it also boosts BBNF, which is this brain protein that helps your brain cells grow and connect. It's like miracle grow for your brain. And of course, there are the endorphins, right? Those feel-good chemicals that can help you power through pain and just make you feel more positive.
Those are the runner's high. Yeah.
Exactly. And then there's your autonomic nervous system, which controls things like your heart rate and breathing. Regular exercise helps that system get better at handling stress. So you're not only getting physically stronger, you're also training your body to be calmer under pressure.
So basically you're building up your stress tolerance, right?
Exactly. And, achieving those challenging physical goals, it just gives you this huge boost of confidence, right? It proves to yourself that you're capable of more than you thought you were.
Like, if I can run a marathon, I can handle anything.
Right.
Okay, so that's how physical challenge strengthens our minds. But what about the other way around? How does being mentally resilient actually improve our physical performance?
So this is where things get really interesting because mental resilience plays a huge role in regulating those stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, which can either help or hinder your performance depending on how well you're managing them.
So it's not just about having willpower, it's about controlling those biological processes too, right?
Absolutely. And mental resilience also helps activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for rest and recovery.
Okay, so it's helping you recover faster too.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're mentally resilient, you can stay focused, even when things get tough. That means better technique, more efficient movement.
So you're not wasting energy, you're staying in the zone.
Precisely. And that allows you to push past your perceived limits, extend your endurance, tap into those hidden reserves of strength.
That's pretty amazing. So it's like this constant cycle, right? A strong mind helps build a strong body, and a strong body helps build a strong mind.
Exactly. They feed off of each other.
Now, let's talk about stepping outside of our comfort zone, right? Because we know that's where the real growth happens. But what exactly is that comfort zone, and why is it so important to push beyond it?
So the comfort zone, it's basically that cozy little bubble where everything feels safe and familiar and predictable. Physiologically, your body's in homeostasis, everything's balanced. Mentally, you're operating on autopilot, using those well-worn neural pathways. It's comfortable, but it's not where you grow.
It's like staying in your pajamas all day.
Yeah.
It's nice, but you're not getting much done.
Exactly. So to really grow, both physically and mentally, we got to step outside that bubble. Physically, our bodies are designed to adapt to stress. So if we want to get stronger, we have to challenge them beyond their current capacity. This is what's known as the overload principle.
It's like lifting heavier weights or running farther than you ever have before.
Right, exactly. And homeostasis, well, it wants to keep things the same, so you have to disrupt that, shake things up a bit.
So we're basically fighting our body's natural tendency to stay comfortable.
In a way, yes. Because new movement patterns, new skills, they only develop when our current abilities aren't enough.
It's like if you always stay on the bunny slopes, you'll never learn to ski the Black Diamond.
Exactly. And if you don't challenge yourself, you can actually get weaker. Your muscles can atrophy, your cardiovascular system can decline.
Wow. So it's not just about getting stronger, it's about preventing decline too.
Exactly. Now, mentally, stepping outside your comfort zone builds resilience. It forces you to adapt to new situations, solve new problems, manage new emotions.
So you're basically training your brain to be more flexible.
Exactly. And you expand your sense of self, You realize you're capable of more than you thought you were.
It's like that feeling of accomplishment when you finally conquer something that seemed impossible.
Right, exactly. And you literally create new neural pathways in your brain. It's like building new roads in your mind. Now, the source talks about this idea of the growth zone. Your comfort zone is that cozy room, right? Well, the growth zone is just outside the door.
It's where the magic happens.
Exactly. It's a little bit uncomfortable, maybe a little chilly, but it's where you adapt and grow. Now, beyond the growth zone is the panic zone. That's like being caught in a blizzard. It's too much, you just shut down.
So we want to find that sweet spot, right? The growth zone.
Exactly. Just enough challenge to stimulate growth, but not so much that it overwhelms us.
Okay, so we've talked about the theory. Now let's get practical. Let's say you're on a long run. Your legs are burning. You just want to quit. What are some concrete ways to reframe that inner dialogue in the moment to keep yourself going?
All right, so in that exact situation, right, the material gives us 3 really useful strategies. The first is segmentation and presence. Instead of focusing on how much farther you have to go, you break down the distance into smaller chunks.
It's like just make it to that next lamppost.
Right, exactly. It's like, okay, just to that tree, then that mailbox, then that corner. You shift your focus away from the overwhelming big picture to just the next little step. Your inner dialogue goes from, I can't do this is too much, to, okay, I can make it to that tree, that's manageable.
So you're tricking your brain a little bit, right?
In a way, yeah, and it works. The second strategy is focusing on your physical form. So when that discomfort hits, you start paying close attention to your technique.
Like, am I breathing properly? Are my shoulders relaxed? What are my feet doing?
Exactly. And this shifts your focus outward away from the pain. It's like, okay, instead of focusing on how much my legs hurt, I'm going to make sure I'm landing on my midfoot. I'm going to keep my core engaged.
So you're turning that internal dialogue into a kind of coaching session.
Exactly. And the third strategy is identity reinforcement. This is where you connect the suffering to your sense of self, to who you are and who you want to become.
So it's like, I'm not a quitter. I'm the kind of person who pushes through challenges.
Right. Exactly. And you can even draw on past experiences, right? Like, I remember that time I thought I couldn't finish that workout, but I did. I'm capable of this.
It's like tapping into that inner strength, that grit.
Exactly. So instead of I want to stop, it becomes this is making me stronger. This is shaping me into the person I want to be.
I love that. It's like reframing the discomfort as a positive force.
Exactly. It's not something happening to you. It's something happening for you.
Now, the material provides a very specific script to use, right, when those thoughts of quitting get really loud. It's called the dialogue of commitment. Can you walk us through how that works?
Yeah, it's almost like an internal debate, between that voice that wants to quit and the voice that wants to keep going. So let's say the thought pops up, this is too hard, I can't do this anymore. The response is, I hear that thought. It's telling me to stop. But that's just my comfort zone talking. I'm not going to give in.
It's like you're acknowledging the discomfort, but you're not letting it control you.
Exactly. And then if the thought is, you've done enough, you can stop now, the response is, remember why you started this, remember your goals, you're committed to seeing this through.
Right. It's about bringing it back to the bigger picture.
And then if the fear of injury comes up, which it often does, it's about differentiating between the pain of pushing yourself and actual danger signals. Like, is this a real injury or is this just discomfort? Am I actually at risk or is this just my mind trying to scare me?
It's about knowing the difference between pushing your limits and being reckless.
Exactly. And then when your mind tries to procrastinate, you can always do this tomorrow. The response is no, now is the time. I'm choosing to do this now.
It's about seizing the moment.
Exactly. So it's this back and forth, this internal dialogue that helps you stay committed.
It's like having a coach in your head.
Exactly. And then it transitions into these more positive, empowering statements.
Give me some examples.
Like, every step I take, every rep I do is making me stronger. Or, this discomfort is temporary, but the growth I'm experiencing is permanent. It's about flipping the script, seeing the challenge as an opportunity.
And the source emphasizes ending with a really powerful affirmation, right?
Absolutely. Like, this isn't happening to me, this is happening for me. It's about owning the experience, taking control.
I love that. So it's like a complete mental makeover from negative to positive, from victim to victor.
Exactly. And what's great is that it's a skill you can develop. The more you practice this kind of self-talk, the more automatic it becomes.
Now, the source also talks about implementing a progressive mental training program, right? Like actually training your mind alongside your body. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, so the idea is to gradually build up your mental resilience, just like you would gradually increase the weight you lift or the distance you run. So it starts with this foundation phase where you're developing basic mental awareness and control.
So what does that look like? Like, what are some specific things you would do?
So in this phase, it's all about mindfulness, right? Like paying attention to your thoughts and feelings without judgment. You can try things like meditation, even if it's just for a few minutes each day. And journaling can be really helpful too. Like after your workouts, just write down what was going through your head, what were those negative thoughts, and how did you deal with them? And then there's breath control, which is so important for regulating your nervous system.
Right, because when you're stressed, your breathing gets all shallow,
Yeah.
and that just makes everything worse.
Exactly. So learning how to breathe deeply and calmly, it can make a huge difference.
Okay, so that's the foundation. What comes next?
Then you move into the challenge introduction phase. This is where you start to intentionally introduce some discomfort, push yourself a little bit mentally.
So we're stepping outside that comfort zone a little bit.
Exactly. You could try things like cold showers. It's uncomfortable, but it's a great way to build mental toughness.
Yeah, I've heard about those. It's like a shock to the system, but it makes you feel alive, right?
Exactly. And visualization can be really powerful too. Like mentally rehearsing a successful workout or competition. It's like pre-programming your brain for success.
It's like seeing yourself crossing the finish line.
Exactly. And mantras can be helpful, like a short positive phrase you can repeat to yourself when things get tough, like, I am strong, or I can do this. And then there's practicing interrupting negative thoughts, catching them before they spiral out of control.
It's like, nope,
Right.
not going to go down that road today.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're building up those mental muscles. What's the next level?
So the next level is the deliberate adversity phase, where you're intentionally seeking out more discomfort. It's like taking those mental training wheels off.
Okay, so we're getting serious now.
Exactly. So here you might try something called embracing the suck meditations. Sounds fun, right?
What is that?
Basically, it's about sitting with discomfort, like physical discomfort or emotional discomfort, and just observing it, accepting it without judgment.
So it's like facing your fears head on.
Exactly. And you can use a technique called the pain dial, where you rate your discomfort on a scale of 1 to 10 and just notice how those sensations change over time. It helps you realize that pain is often transient, it comes and goes.
It's not always as bad as it feels in the moment.
Exactly. And you want to practice positive self-talk, especially during those really challenging parts of your workout.
Like when you want to quit the most.
Yeah, that's when it's most important. And then partner workouts can be great for this too, because you can actually talk about your mental strategies with each other, hold each other accountable.
It's like having a built-in support system.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've embraced the suck. We're feeling pretty tough. What's the final stage?
So the final stage is integration and mastery. This is where you take all those mental skills you've been developing and you apply them when it matters most, at peak intensity.
Just like game time, right?
Exactly. So here, you might push yourself to your absolute limit in training and just really pay attention to your mental state. Like, what are my thoughts? How am I managing my emotions? You might even simulate worst-case scenarios in your mind and plan how you would respond.
Like, what if I hit the wall at mile 20 of the marathon? What am I going to tell myself?
Exactly. And it's about reinforcing that identity. I am a resilient athlete. I can handle anything. And you can even practice trying to access that flow state during your toughest workouts, that feeling of being completely in the zone, where everything just clicks.
That's where you feel like you could run forever, right?
Exactly.
Now, the Source offers this really cool 1-week plan, right? The Controlled Adversity Plan. What's the idea behind that?
Yeah, it's like a mini boot camp for your mind, right? You're using specific physical challenges throughout the week to really target different aspects of mental resilience.
So each day has a different focus.
Exactly. So for example, Monday might be a long, slow endurance run, and the mental focus is on segmentation, breaking down that distance into smaller, manageable chunks. Tuesday could be an active recovery day, maybe some light yoga or stretching, but you incorporate something intentionally uncomfortable, like a cold shower or an ice bath, and the focus is on embracing that discomfort.
So you're training your mind not to shy away from discomfort.
Exactly. Wednesday could be a high-intensity interval training day, HIIT, and the focus is on managing those catastrophic thoughts that tend to pop up when you're really pushing your limits. Thursday could be all about maintaining perfect technique, even when you're fatigued, so you're building that mental focus.
So it's about staying sharp even when your body's tired.
Right. Friday, you could throw in something totally unexpected, maybe a new activity or a workout you've never done before, just to build that mental flexibility and adaptability. Saturday, you can grab a workout buddy and actually talk through your mental strategies, hold each other accountable.
So you're verbalizing your inner dialogue.
Exactly. And then Sunday, it's all about reflection, taking some time to think about how you handled the week's challenges, what worked well, what didn't, and what you can improve on for the next week.
That sounds like a really well-rounded plan. Now, the Source also addresses the issue of hitting a plateau, when your progress stalls, and how that can really mess with your motivation. What's the integrated approach to breaking through that kind of barrier?
All right, so the first step is really understanding the problem, right? It's doing a thorough assessment of both the physical and mental factors that might be contributing to that plateau. So on the physical side, it's looking at your training log, right? Are you training too hard, not recovering enough? Are you eating properly? Are there any underlying injuries you might be ignoring? And then you want to measure your performance metrics, track your progress objectively.
So you're gathering data like a scientist.
Exactly. Now, on the mental side, it's all about checking in with yourself emotionally. How are you feeling about your training? Are you still excited about it? Are you feeling frustrated, bored, maybe even resentful?
Because those emotions can really sabotage your progress.
Absolutely. And then you want to revisit your motivation, like what was it that got you started on this journey in the first place? Is that still important to you? Or have your priorities shifted? Once you have a good understanding of the problem, then you can start to develop a strategy, right? So physically, you might incorporate a deload week, where you reduce your training volume to allow your body to recover. You could try a new training stimulus, something you've never done before, to challenge your body in new ways. Maybe switch up your training variables, change the intensity or the volume. You could even try training in a new environment.
Like taking your workout outdoors.
Exactly. Or maybe joining a new gym or finding a training partner. And then you can do some testing to see if there are any specific limiting factors, like maybe you need to improve your mobility or work on your nutrition.
So it's about experimenting and seeing what works.
Exactly. Now, mentally, it's about reconstructing your motivation, like reconnecting with those core reasons why you started training in the first place.
It's like reminding yourself why you're doing this.
Exactly. And then you want to reset your relationship with training, focus on the process, the enjoyment of it, rather than just the outcomes. It's about falling in love with the journey, not just the destination.
I love that. It's about being present, enjoying the moment.
Exactly. And then integrating those novel challenges, those things you've never done before, that can be really helpful for reigniting your motivation.
Because novelty keeps things interesting, right?
Exactly. And the Source lays out this 7-week timeline for implementing this strategy, right? So the first 2 weeks are all about reset and reconnection. You reduce your training load, you really focus on rediscovering your why, your love for training. Then weeks 3 and 4 are all about systematic experimentation. This is where you try different things, new workouts, new mental strategies, and you see what really sparks that fire, what gets you excited again. Then weeks 5 and 6, you start to gradually reintegrate those elements back into a more structured program.
So you're building a new routine based on what you've learned.
Exactly. And then week 7 is assessment and adjustment, where you review your progress, see what's working, what's not, and you make a plan for the future.
It's like a constant cycle of learning and adapting.
Exactly. That's the beauty of it.
Now, the final section of the material gets into some really interesting stuff. This idea that different types of physical challenges actually create different patterns of mental resistance. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so it's fascinating, right? Like, the mental game is different depending on what kind of physical challenge you're facing. So for endurance activities, things like running marathons or cycling long distances, the common patterns of resistance, they often revolve around this feeling of despair, like this is never going to end, how much longer? And you start making small compromises, walking when you should be running.
It's like death by a thousand cuts, right?
Exactly. And that discomfort, it gets amplified in your mind over time.
Because you're just in it for so long.
Yeah. Exactly. And your motivation, it can really start to waver. So the mental strategies here, they often involve things like breaking down the event into smaller segments, using those mantras to keep you focused, trying to detach from the passage of time, reframing your perception of your energy levels, and constantly reminding yourself why you're doing this.
It's like a constant internal pep talk, right?
Exactly. Now, strength and power challenges, lifting heavy weights, trying to hit a new personal record, the mental resistance there is often rooted in fear. Fear of failure, fear of injury.
It's like, what if I can't lift it? What if I hurt myself?
Exactly. And there's a lot of black and white thinking. It's either success or failure, no in between. People get stuck in their heads. They overthink the technique, and that can lead to tension, which actually makes it harder to perform well.
So you're literally psyching yourself out.
Exactly. So the mental game here, it's about building confidence, using really clear and simple mental cues, amplifying those feelings of power and determination, and reinforcing that identity as someone who is strong and capable.
So you're basically talking yourself into it.
In a way, yeah. Now, flexibility and mobility work, that can be surprisingly mentally challenging, but in a very different way.
Because it's often seen as less intense,
Right. Yeah.
but it can be really tough. Expert,